But yeah, it's just classic Drake. Like he can't be trusted with anything. He can't be trusted to follow orders or to stick to any kind of plan or anything like that. He just yeah, does what he wants. But the funny thing is that because he was just a vice admiral, he wasn't in command of the tactics or anything like that. But all of the letters of like Philip II and the Duke of Medina Sidonia, who's the commander of the Spanish fleet, all those people and all the Spanish captains and stuff, in all their letters, they say stuff like Drake might be in Plymouth, or if Drake is in Plymouth, then sail past. They just use the word Drake as a synonym for the English fleet. Like as far as the Spanish are concerned, like Drake is the Royal Navy, and the Royal Navy is Drake. That's how famous he is at this point, and that's how much the Spanish regard him because he's the one that's done them all the damage. So when they talk about the English fleet, they just think it's Drake basically, but he wasn't even in
Right.
command. He was just one of the commanders.
Right.
Yeah, and then he comes back. So he disappears at night, and he comes back with a yeah, he comes back with a ship. Yeah, and he says, "Oh, I'll just come across it," and it surrenders to him. That's it. There's a giant Spanish galleon that's been into some trouble. It's lost its rudder or something, and then Drake sails up to it, and they immediately surrender, and then he tows that
Oh,
back, or he basically says, "Yeah, that's my ship now." So, and then because he personally took it under the laws of the sea or whatever, he gets the most of the value of it. So yeah, he's again like he's
nice.
bear in mind he's already super rich by this point. He's won like at least three fortunes. He's got like enough to buy loads of land, a grand house. He's like he doesn't need to take some Spanish galleon,
He's
but he does
addicted to
it
it.
and he's addicted to it. He must be, and he puts the survival of the whole English fleet at risk to do it, and therefore he puts the safety of the whole of the whole kingdom in
Oh,
some small way at
oh,
risk to just disappear and take this prize.
well, we say it jokingly that he's addicted to it, but it seems like it is what he lives for. Because
Mm,
the other things that happen towards the end of his life. But it does seem that because sometimes you do get millionaires or billionaires who still work really hard at something. And maybe normal people, I certainly do think, oh, why do you even bother? Why don't you just relax
mm,
every day? But some people, like, they live for something, and riches and
mm,
fame doesn't really matter anymore. It's that thing.
mm.
And I think
Yeah,
screwing over
totally.
the
Yeah.
Spanish or taking Spanish ships, it's that for Drake.
Mm. Yeah, I think so. I think it must be. Um, So then the battles continue. They have all these running battles with the Armada. Then they have the great battle at Gravelines, kind of near Calais, basically. And the English, there's a huge battle. There's the fire ships in the night, the famous fire ships that the English launch towards the Spanish at anchor. It scatters the Spanish Armada. Then the English swoop in the morning and blast away at the Spanish all day long and cause cause considerable casualties, do loads of damage to the Spanish fleet, and drives them away basically, drives them away into the North Sea, and then the Armada sails off, and then the English fleet follows them all the way to Scotland, basically sees them away from England, and then the Spanish just keep going around Scotland all the way back down past Ireland
All the way
and back down
around
to northern
Ireland.
Spain.
And aren't they
Yeah,
like they've got not enough water and food, and it's just like terrible conditions, and yeah,
yeah,
that.
yeah. It must be terrible. Yeah, it must be really, really bad. So and loads of them get wrecked on various coasts. It's terrible. Yeah, it's really unpleasant. But I mean, a lot of them do get back, but some of them are in such a bad way. Like they sail back to Santander on the north coast, and like the ports aren't ready to receive all these men. So like even when they get back to Spain, a lot of them after this harrowing ordeal, starvation and stuff, they get back to land, and then the Spanish towns are like, we can't feed thousands and thousands of men because it's still like tens of thousands of men come back, and so a lot of them starve on Spanish soil, which is extra tragic, I think.
Oh, what? I
Um,
didn't know that.
yeah, yeah, because there's not the organisation that you have in a like a modern state, where you can
Yeah.
organise stuff like that. But yeah, I mean that's horrific. So yeah, so again, that's a great moment that Drake is part of. He's essentially he's climbed as high as he possibly can do socially from his original position. He's not going to be, no matter what he does, he can't become an earl or something. He's famous. He's a knight. He's fabulously wealthy. He's welcomed at court, although they still laugh at him for his accent and his rough manners and stuff. And people still say, like, he's a loose cannon, and he is what he is. And then
Just that it was obviously a victim of our greatest victory. Historians kind of glibly say, don't they, that it's a turning point when we went from a backwater to the very first kernels of empire, and things were set in motion for sort of the great few centuries that were to come. But Churchill writes this, quote, "The nation was united in the face of Spanish preparation. An army was assembled at Tilbury, which reached 20,000 men under the command of Lord Leicester, while the Armada was still off the coast of England. Queen Elizabeth reviewed the army at Tilbury and addressed them in these stirring words. My loving people, we have been persuaded by some that are careful for our safety to take heed how to commit ourselves to armed multitudes for fear of treachery. But I assure you, I do not desire to live to distrust my faithful and loving people. Let tyrants fear, and therefore I am come amongst you, as you see, resolved, in the midst and heat of the battle, to live or die amongst you all, to lay down for my God and for my kingdom and for my people, my honour and my blood, even in the dust. I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and a king of England too, and think foul scorn that Parma or Spain or any prince of Europe should dare to invade the borders of my realm, to which, rather than any dishonour shall grow by me, I myself will take up arms. I myself will be your general, judge, and rewarder of every one of your virtues in the field. I know already for your forwardness you have deserved rewards and crowns, and we do assure you, in the word of a prince, they shall be duly paid you." End quote.
one of my
But
favorite
yeah,
quotes ever. No, I think it's you can imagine she's saying that in front of thousands and thousands and thousands of assembled English soldiers who are, as far as they know, they're getting ready to fight off the might of Spain.
yeah, in a land
They,
battle.
yeah, and they're roaring their approval at her after she says that stuff. That's recorded as what she said. She actually said that stuff. I mean, it's
I think so.
absolutely
Yeah.
cracking. Yeah, it is. She was obviously extremely well educated, and she was a very, very good orator. Probably properly trained as an orator in the art of oratory, and it's amazing. Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic.
One quick footnote on that would be that I think ultimately, when it became clear that there would be no land battle, that the Armada would be defeated at sea, that army assembled at Tilbury was just abandoned. Basically, I think maybe Elizabeth stiffed them for money, or some of the money, or something like that. I think ultimately the ending of all of that was a bit ignominious, if I remember correctly.
I'm sure it was. Yeah, yeah, because I mean, this how kind of backward and old-fashioned England was at the time, where even though they knew for years that this was coming, when Leicester called in the army to assemble, they said the Spanish Armada has been sighted off the south coast of England. Everyone come to Tilbury. It took them, like, even to get the militia forces from Essex, I think took about 4 days. And Tilbury is Essex, like, and then all of the other forces, so the other, tens of thousands of other men eventually kind of trickled in from other counties until most of them were there when the Queen was there. But yeah, it took days for them to get together. It wasn't very well organised, even though they knew what
Yeah,
was gonna come. But yeah, there was talking about how Drake was seen as the English Navy. Really,
yeah.
there's a quote. There's a quote in a letter from the Pope Sixtus V, and I think it's a letter to Philip, but I'm not sure. But he's writing a letter in the year of the Armada, and this is the quote from the Pope. Just look at Drake. Who is he? What forces has he? And yet he burned 25 of the king's ships at Gibraltar, and as many again at Lisbon. He has robbed the flotilla and sacked San Domingo. His reputation is so great that his countrymen flock to him to share his booty. We are sorry to say it, but we have a poor opinion of this Spanish Armada and fear some disaster. End quote. That was the Pope.
Wow.
Drake, again, this son of a yeoman, is now being kind of feared by the Pope. It's amazing, absolutely amazing. But it's pretty much the pinnacle of his career, or the plateau of his career. And then So what happens after this?
Or he holds on a
Armada.
bit too long.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's what we mentioned earlier, where what happened is when Hawkins saw the opportunities for slaving, and then the Spanish adapted, and then they couldn't do that anymore, and then Drake started basically committing piracy, and then the Spanish adapted in the West Indies, so he went to attack the treasure on land, and they adapted to that, and then so there was no opportunity left in that area, so he sailed into the Pacific. So he was always shifting his tactics as the Spanish adapted. But then he got to a point where it's probably in his late 40s by this point, and he just basically sails back to the West Indies and tries to do more of the same. He tries to attack certain towns and ports. I think he does sack and burn a few places, like somewhere in Florida he does, and he still takes some ships here and there. But basically, the Spanish have adapted, and what used to be rather undefended towns have now built up their defences, and the local authorities have organised
But
better
but
responses.
but he's back in the West Indies, in the Americas. Like you would have thought that after the Armada, it's like the fourth or fifth amazing thing he'd done. You would have thought it would
Mm,
be time to retire, to just
mm.
you've risked your life so many times. It would be time. It seems a bit crazy in a way to go back and to buccaneering or privateering.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's like when you see like boxers and
Yeah, I was
MMA
just going to say
fighters that go
boxers
on
and
too
race car
long.
drivers sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like they're addicted to it. They've got millions in the bank, and but they can't give up. How many MMA fighters and boxers retire and then they come out of retirement and they get beaten up in like sometimes it's like 5 or 6 fights where they'll get knocked out and they still come back and like get knocked out again and stuff, and it's just embarrassing, and like even people that
Yeah.
love seeing people get knocked out don't want to see it. And that's the feeling I get with Drake, is that it's like, oh, it's just embarrassing. Like he kind of has one failure after another, and he's kind of sidelined. He's off there doing this thing and failing, and everyone's still like, oh, he's still Drake, but he's no longer at the center of the political situation. He's off doing this thing. He does do other stuff. He does have impact. He does, as I say, he does attack some stuff and things like that. But he's just, the world has changed. I think he
Isn't
has.
there one particular action where he tries to sort of recreate Cadiz or does something really similar to what he did at Cadiz and it just completely fails? Is that right?
Yeah, well, this is the great English Armada, where the year after the Spanish Armada, they try and attack mainland Spain, and it's just they do attack. I think they attack Lisbon. Is it? I can't remember, but it's a terrible failure. They have a few
Right.
inconsequential or inconclusive battles. They take lots of damage, but then the English fleet get dysentery or some sort of disease, and thousands of Englishmen die, and they come home. It's just a failure.
Oh, shit.
Um, and a couple of other things like that. But there's no need for it anyway. The Spanish aren't coming back. It's not really gonna. The Spanish have had enough. They're not going to bother doing it anymore. And then yeah, so that's how he spends his last kind of decade. Really, is ineffective raids and stuff. He's still got a incredibly loyal crew. There's obviously a new generation coming through now. A bunch more new young men that are following him, and
Yeah, like the Walter
uh,
Rileys.
yeah, he's inspired loads of other captains to do the same thing, and but as I say, it's a different world now, and so he has these repeated ignominious failures, and then he tries to attack a town in off the Spanish Main, and his men get sick, and he gets ill. I think he's about 55 when he dies, and he succumbs to some illness, and he has some horrific tropical fever. Bear in mind, he's been in these tropical areas loads of times before, and he's been in crews where loads of them have died. One of the first ones he went, I think maybe his first or his second voyage when he was in command, he lost about 40% of his men to a tropical disease.
Huh.
40% of his crew died in one bout of horrific, whatever it was, yellow fever or something that ripped
Or
through.
like
One of them was his
dysentery.
younger brother.
Did
There's
he
some.
actually die of dysentery in the end? A bloody flux?
I don't think so. I think it was some fever, some horrific tropical fever.
So he was still just out in the Indies on the other side of the Atlantic, still just doing his thing
Exactly.
when he
Yeah.
died.
Yeah. So they tried to take a town, and they failed. They tried to take another port, and they failed that. They took some casualties, and they went to repair and prepare for another attack. And then people started dying. And then Drake went into his cabin, and he was ill for a few days, and he started making his will. And at one point, he started kind of raving, and he jumped out of bed. Everyone knew he was going to die. He jumped out of bed and demanded that they dress him in his armor, so that he would die as a soldier.
Huh.
And his men just said, like, okay, just lay down again. Like, we're not going to do that. And then, so yeah, he made his last will and testament, and then he died. And then they buried him in a lead coffin off the coast. So they gave him a service, put him in a lead coffin, dumped him over the side, and no one's ever found his coffin.
Yeah, that was one thing I read or heard. I can't remember where, but apparently one of his last dying wishes, he expressly said over and over again, "I don't want to be buried at sea," and then they did.
I don't. I think he asked to be buried at sea, as far as I know.
Oh right, okay.
But yeah, there's different accounts. There was some contentious stuff when he died as well. So there was like there were cousins and his younger brothers and other
He would have had
people
a
that were
huge
kind of
estate.
squabbling over his estate. Yeah, exactly. And some of them were going to get this, some were going to get that. Some of them were with him, and some of them weren't. And there was a lot of wrangling over his estate, basically. So there was all conflicting stuff about that. But yeah, a rather kind of ignominious end to a great career. But it doesn't take away from the rest of his achievements, which were remarkable. And he was world famous in his own time, and he's continued
Yeah, I
to be
mean,
famous ever
the the,
since.
the circumnavigation of the globe for me is probably his greatest achievement. But yeah, I'd say four, maybe five things that are good enough for someone to sort of echo through the ages. He was involved in all of them. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, and it's a weird thing that he got married kind of after one of his early successful voyages. He got married to some country woman that was obviously an ill-educated, just a nobody basically. And she's barely in anything. He barely refers to her. She doesn't crop up in anything, and he never had any children with her. So one or both of them were
Mm.
infertile, which is obviously really sad. But yeah, so his estate was divided between his relatives. But and again, there are so many conflicting views on the man, as you keep saying that the Spanish saw him as a pirate, which obviously he was, and a lot of people think he was just an immoral kind of swashbuckling piratical type character, which to some extent he was. He's obviously a hero to the English, or historically he has been a hero to the English, and then other kind of revisionist people have criticised him, but there was a lot of that even when he was alive. Some people loved him, some people hated him, and that's also continued. But for me, I just think he's clearly just an incredible figure. The things he achieved are astonishing. Yeah, the round the world journey in itself, just a navigational feat. But he didn't just navigate around the world. He was like a pirate raid around the world.
Yeah, like I mean, despite his crimes, because you can say even in his age he committed some crimes.
Uh,
But
I
you can
don't know.
say the
I don't
same
know that.
about someone like Alexander.
Well, Alexander definitely is a way worse murderer than than Drake.
Sure.
Even in criminal terms. But like, I
I
think.
was raised. I was told in like like the Ladybird version, that he was a great hero. I remember being at uni.
Mm,
I was actually at uni. I was like, I suppose 19 years old, and I was speaking to a Swedish kid, guy, someone in my year. And somehow Drake came up, and I just referred to him and mentioned him in the terms of a hero, a great shining
mm,
hero. And he was like, "What? What are you talking about?" He was pretty bad, bro. And I was like, No, he
mm,
wasn't. He's the guy's a hero, like a Nelson type or a Wellington type figure.
yeah.
And it was really a shock to me that because he was Swedish, he just had a different view on it. He wasn't raised to
Mm,
think of him that way.
mm,
And he was like, no, he's
mm,
kind of a bad dude. He was a pirate, and it was really
mm,
a bit of a shock to me to be like,
mm,
oh yeah, I suppose he was. Oh yeah.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just the fact that he was so successful and so daring that people were outraged by the stuff he did. But in terms of like how he actually treated people, it was pretty great, really. Like whenever he took a ship, he would like invite the captain of that ship to dine with him. He was done politely. They didn't torture anyone. All the slaves that he captured, so the Portuguese ships and the Spanish ships that had slaves in the holds, every time he captured them, he would free them. He'd say, "Can I take you to some land, or any of you guys want to be a crew member on my ship?" Through his entire career, when he was in command, that's how he treated his prisoners. He wasn't a bad person. He was a moral person. He acted morally. He attacked Spanish ships. He did steal their stuff. But again, in context, he was a decent man, I think. I think he was. It's just
Yeah,
that
of his
his
age.
achievements were so great that they pissed a lot of people off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's amazing. I think he's one of the great figures of English history, of course.